Says the microphone for the video.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Farallon Live. While we wait for everyone to stream in, if you want to put where you're tuning in from in the chat and your favorite seal or sea lion, you get extra points if it's elephant seal. All right, well, I think I'm going to get started. So welcome to another episode of Farallons Live. I'm Garrett Duncan, the winter Farallon biologist, and joining me today is Mackenzie Cahill. He will be monitoring the chat and asking questions. So yeah, if you have any questions as the program goes on, feel free to put them in, and we'll take breaks throughout the program to answer any questions. So the name of the program today is the Saga of the Sea Lions and Elephant Seals on the island. And there are 5 species of pinnipeds on the island, which are seals and sea lions. There are harbor seals, elephant seals, California sea lions, Steller sea lions, and northern fur seals. So historically, they've been hunted for meat or fur or blubber, but in recent years, they've had a major comeback. At one point, there was tens of thousands of fur seals on the island, and they were actually hunted completely off the island. And thanks to the National Wildlife Refuge system and the Farallones being one of the first Pacific wildlife refuges, this provided a very safe haven for a lot of pinniped species and allowed them to rebound in peace. So in 2010, or rather, as time has gone on, we've seen exponential growth since our monitoring over the last 50 years. And since 2010, California sea lions had 40 pups. Last year, they had over 700. And northern fur seals have a similar story, that in 2010, they had 120 pups, and last year they had 750. So it's a huge success story, and there's a lot of talking going on in the elephant seal colony behind me. So it's really important to monitor these species, and it's an amazing success story. So today's episode will focus mainly on the elephant seals, though. And the elephant seals are a success story of their own. So in the late 1800s, they were hunted to what was thought to be extinction. And then at the very end of the 19th century, about less than 100 of them were found off of Guadalupe Island. And since the Mexican and US government put them under such strict protections, they were able to rebound to almost their historic range and almost their historic numbers. Do we have any questions?
Do you have any sense of what the survival rate is for those increases in birth rates?
Do I have any sense of the survival rate for the birth for the California sea lions and fur seals? Okay. I think that it's mainly just that without the pressure from the historic pressure from humans, that they've just been able to come in mass to the island, and just having more and more of them, and under the protection of the National Wildlife Refuge system, that they're just able to have more successful pups. Yeah. So basically, the elephant seals, as they've started to rebound, have started to recolonize different colonies all the way up the Pacific coast, starting from Baja California, and then moving up through Piedras Blancas, Channel Islands, Año Nuevo, Point Reyes National Seashore, Farallones, and a new colony in the Kings Range off the Lost Coast, which is very cool. It's very cool to see them moving back north. So historically, when the Farallones first had their elephant seals come back, and the first one showed up in 1959, and then the population exploded. The first pup was 1972, I believe. And since then, their population went through the roof. And at one point, there was over 400 elephant seal cows on the island. And this area had over 100. So we have a historic photo from some of the slides that we've been scanning, some historic 35mm slides. And you can see just the difference between nowadays and back then. Yeah, just a second. So since then, things have changed a little bit, and there was another historic photo that we had that may shed some light on that. So everyone take a look at the picture and let me know what you think the difference is between what you see behind me and what you see in the photo. I think it's also very cool to see all these buildings in the background that are no longer here. I think this was spring 1967, if I recall correctly. So, did anyone notice what was different about back then and today? Well, yeah, there were a lot more birds, but the main thing is that this colony is actually called Sand Flat, which at this point is a bit ironic because there isn't much sand left. So the increased frequency and intensity of storms in the last 30 or so years has actually caused a lot of habitat degradation. So a lot of the sediment that the elephant seals use to access their breeding areas, and they're very fond of flipping sand onto their backs in order to thermoregulate, has disappeared from the island. And I think that that is just not as appealing to them. So, and the large storm events have had a direct impact on pup survival. So as time has gone on, we've seen the colony slowly start to decline. And it is stabilized around 100 cows or so on both Seppi and West End. Yeah, let's have a question.
Do they only breed along the coast, or historically would they have gone all the way to Maine?
Have they gone, or historically, would they go where?
To the San Francisco Bay or region markets?
Huh. So the question is whether they stick to the coastline or whether they actually breed within the San Francisco Bay. And I'm not exactly sure, actually. My intuition is that they stick to the coasts, but I'm not sure. It's possible. And certainly some of them would end up in there, but they may not find very appealing breeding habitat in a marshy area. They like sand a lot. Any other questions?
Are elephant seals found on all the islands throughout the?
So the question is if elephant seals are found on all of the islands. I think that they only breed, I believe, on the Southeast Farallon Island and West End. So as part of the Farallon complex, there's also the Middle Farallon Island, which at high tide and large swells gets washed over. And then the North Farallon Islands, which actually you might be able to see. You swing around. So the North Farallon Islands are considerably steeper, and elephant seals are not known for their climbing skills. Sea lions are much better up the rocks, but elephant seals kind of ooze more than walk. And there's a very fun name for the motion that they do in order to go along the rocks. And it's almost onomatopoeic. It's galumphing. So, so anyway, the colony, we've seen somewhat of a decline since the peak of nearly 400 animals in 1993 and 95. And, but it's still vital information that we have. So Point Blue's long-term data set is vital in order to understand the factors that influence site selection and reproductive success.
Another question. Have females pups in more than one colony?
Oh, absolutely. So the question is, have females pupped in more than one colony? And absolutely. Females can live for almost probably 20 years or so. And we certainly see a lot of females that have tags that are deployed from other colonies, and other colonies see pink tags as well. So in order to track these animals and make sure that we know who's from where and to study them, we have several tools, and one of them is using flipper tags. So here I have a flipper tag, and it's a small piece of plastic with a number on it. Get a little closer. And basically that enables us to track the individuals from year to year. And also we collaborate with other colonies to track where our cows and our weaned pups are dispersing from. So, oh, Russ Bradley has a question. All right. Ah, yes. Okay. Yes, a tech question. So basically, we've just invested in a small device that is able to beam internet to the colony. So it basically beams internet from the house to the tripod over there. And then we have a Wi-Fi node that is broadcasting Wi-Fi to the colony. And this tech will enable us to basically have a live from the Farallones from anywhere that the lighthouse can see on the island. So stay tuned for a lot more exciting and up close interactions with the island. A diet question? Okay, yeah. Yeah, okay. So the question was, what do elephant seals eat, and are they affected by plastic pollution? I will get to that in just a second. I want to talk about, so basically they're here from mid-December until March. And while they're here, they don't actually eat anything. So they haul out onto the rocks and they just hang out. The males will establish harems, and the females will come out and pup. But for the rest of the year, they actually go further, considerably further north up to Juneau, Alaska. Most of the females congregate around there, and the males will oftentimes go all the way out on the Aleutian Island chain. And they're specially adapted for deep sea diving. So they eat all sorts of deep water squid, and they use their specially adapted eyes in order to detect faint bioluminescence in critters in the water column. So that's called benthic feeding, deep water feeding. So they are specially adapted. They have very, very high blood oxygen content in order to be able to deep dive and safely do that. So I have a quiz question for everyone. How deep is the deepest elephant seal dive? And throw your guesses in the chat. You'll probably be surprised. So I see some of the people in the chat are getting pretty close. In fact, they can dive down to 5,000 feet, and the largest males can hold their breath for 2 hours. And fun little fact, sometimes during these dives, as you can see, they're predisposed to napping. During these dives, sometimes they just fall asleep in the water column and they just hold their breath. So imagine that you're scuba diving and you're going down, and all of a sudden you look up and there's a bull elephant seal just asleep vertical in the water column in front of you. That would not be super great, but very cool. So in addition to the saga of all of the pinnipeds on the island, there is a social saga that goes on every year and every day. And the experience that we have working on the Farallones has enabled us to see the magic of the colony in every day and experience it every day. So each year, for most of the year, there's a lot of immatures, maybe 2 or 3 years old, that hang out around the island. They inhabit this whole area. There's one over here by the logs here. But as the breeding animals start to show up, they're not super happy about all the hormones in the air, so they tend to depart the island. And the first ones to arrive are the large males. So as you can see here, here's a moderately sized male, and he's actually on the fringe. So you can see in the main colony, we'll pan over there, that there is, you may not be able to see him. He's hanging out in the cuddle puddle of cows over there. So that is our harem master. His name is Martin, and he was tagged a number of years ago, and he's been the harem master for 2 years now. So the large males will arrive before anyone else to establish dominance and basically create harems. And then as time goes on, starting around Christmas each year, the cows will start to arrive in larger and larger numbers until about now is the peak arrival. Do we have any other questions? Sure.
So where exactly do they go when they're not breeding here? What's their migration like? And
So,
habitats?
what was the last one?
Have they found new habitats?
Yeah, so the question is, where do they go when they're not here, and have they found any new habitats? So there's actually 2 migrations that happen. There's 2 points where elephant seals haul out. They come here to breed, and then after they breed, then they start to head north back up to Alaska. And at some point along the way, they'll just come out of the water, and they'll haul out again. And the purpose of that is to molt their skin. And basically they have a layer of fur and the outer layer of skin that they remove and refresh each year. So they stop and do that along the way. And at the end of each season, we see a lot of animals from colonies further south that come here to molt. And then by the end, they move on north and they head back to Alaska, where they feed for the rest of the year. And they fatten themselves up so that they're ready to give birth to a pup and pass on all of that blubber to the pup. So it's really, really interesting to see a cow arrive very fat. Its hips are really wide because it's got a pup inside it, and it comes here and they give birth. And then over the course of the next 30 days before she departs, she can pass upwards of 10 pounds to the pup each day. So a lot of pups start out 50 to 60 pounds when they're born, maybe a little bit more than that. And then they tack on about 10 pounds each day. So in the end, a well-fed pup will be basically spherical. So we have our first pup of the season that was born on Christmas, I believe. Yeah, so it was born on Christmas. The mother's name is Venus. She's been coming to the island for several years now. And yeah, that is the first chubby nugget of the season. And we expect that he's going to be even fatter by the time she leaves. The timing of it is approximately a week until she'll depart. Do we have any other questions? Uh-huh.
How seals adapt to going down into pressure, diving?
Okay. So the question is, how do they adapt to going down in pressure? And I don't know specifically if they have a specific adaptation for that. The one thing that I do know for sure is that they have extremely high blood oxygenation. So they have specialized hemoglobin that can carry a ridiculous amount of oxygen. I don't know exactly why they don't get the bends when they come up. Maybe they just come up slow enough. So I would have to look into that. But they are specially adapted. And tying back into Pete Warzebach's a couple of Farallon lives ago, the shark attack one, you can actually see a difference if a shark attacks an elephant seal or a California sea lion. You can actually tell by the color of the blood that you see in the water, which I think is very cool, although maybe a little morbid. But do we have any other questions?
Behavioral question.
Yeah, behavioral question.
How aggressive are these animals, and what is the safe distance for us to maintain?
Okay, so yeah, the question is, how aggressive are the animals, and what's a safe distance? I would say that any wild animal, giving them the most distance that you can is a good idea. Elephant seals, I think we're maybe 50 feet away, and that's about as close as I would get. And I'm trained to work with elephant seals. That's about as close as I would get. Once they start to notice you, then you know you're too close. But for the most part, they're all napping, and they aren't very aggressive towards us. They're more worried about taking care of their pups and passing on as much nutrition to them as possible before they leave. Now, the males, on the other hand, they can be extremely aggressive, but towards one another. So essentially, Martin is the harem master of this harem of females. And this male over here has been hanging out here for weeks. So he's biding his time. He's waiting for Martin to slip up and for him to have a chance to sneak into the harem and mate with the females. So most of the time, they won't get that far because they posture, they show off their noses or their proboscises, and their shields, and which are a bunch of scar tissue developed from fighting a lot. And usually just vocalizations, when they rear up on their bellies and put their heads up in the air, then they yell with this really deep clattery sound. And usually that's enough to have the small males turn tail and run. But every once in a while, it does come to blows. And there's always some action down here at the colony. You have another question?
Do you know which cows are super moms, or what individual has had the most pups successfully on the colony?
This year, I'm not sure who is a super. Oh, sorry. The question was, do we know if there are any super moms this year? And so a super mom is basically a cow that has successfully reared a pup over and over and over again. I know that we have several that are very successful and have been here for many years. I think Venus has been here for 6 to 8 years. And she has successfully reared a pup most of those years. Are you able to zoom in? Oh, great. And then we have another cow named Radish, who has come here for as long as I've been here, and several years before, and she's successfully reared almost all of her pups. But I don't know if we have, I haven't checked if we have any pups that, or cows that have done like 10 plus years in a row successfully. Do we have any more questions in the chat?
What other means do we have of identifying the cows?
Yeah. So the question was, what means do we have to identify the cows in the colony? And because we have a very intimate scientific collection method, we have such a small colony, we're able to come down here and identify every single female each time. So there's a lot of ways that we can do that. The easiest way of doing it year to year is with the flipper tags. But you may be able to see on some of the animals back there that there are numbers on them. And one of the ways that we can do that is with hair dye. So just salon quality hair dye. We basically make a mixture of these things and we apply it gently with this stamper pole. So we use these pads, we cut out numbers, and we just soak these in hair dye and gently press it against the sides of the cows. And that way we can identify them even if their flipper tags get covered in dirt. So that's a very useful tool. And then also we have a newer photo identification program that we use to catalog specific marks on different cows. If they have particular scars, then we're able to identify them from year to year, even if they don't have a flipper tag.
Does the differences in color mean anything as far as between all the different individuals? Some are lighter and some are darker.
So the question is if there's any difference between the colors between different elephant seals, and I'm not sure. That may just be a different colored pelage. I'm not exactly sure. I know that some of it might be some dirt that might be exaggerating the color difference between the more gray seals and the browner ones. But I'm guessing that there's just some variation in the color of their fur. So that would be great. The question was, is there any plan to bring sand back to the colony? And it might be a little tough. That would be really great. I advocate that completely, and they would love it too. But I don't believe that with the large storm events happening, I don't believe that it would stick around very long. So it's not a plan that's in the works, but sounds great. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a question about this small individual. So this elephant seal right here next to the rocks is an immature. So it was probably born last year, judging by its size. And it may be here to molt. So you might be able to see on the video that it looks kind of patchy, and that's because it's molting right now. And so it's losing its kind of blonde coat on the outside, and it's revealing the nicer gray shiny coat underneath. And scratching itself, which is adorable. So, all right, well, we've just about used up our time, but do we have any last minute questions before we sign off for the day? Yeah, so they sneeze a lot. And one of the reasons that they do that is to expel salt. A lot of these that have been out of the water for a long time, I'm not sure why they continue to sneeze, but they definitely make a lot of boogers. So maybe it's just to clear out their sinuses.
How can people get involved with this project?
Yeah, so the Farallones are staffed almost entirely by volunteer research assistants, and you can get more information from Point Blue's website. And there's also plenty of more live from the Farallones that will happen in the future, more up close and personal thanks to this cool new tech. And if you're interested in another live event tomorrow at 10:30, there's one live from the lab, and they'll be talking about their work there. All right, well, I think that's all the time we have for today. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And stay tuned for more in the future.